Looking to become a full-stack developer? In the next hour, you will get a hands-on introduction to web development, covering the essentials on HTML. If you're eager to dive deeper, our comprehensive course is linked below. Now, let's start building your development skills.
Hello, welcome to this complete full stack mega course. My name is Dave Kidd and I'll be your guide throughout the class. And I've been teaching this stuff since about 2008, so I've seen how incredibly important it is and how it can be really useful in other people's lives. This course is going to go over things like HTML, CSS, how to build websites. You'll be creating a banking system, and in the end you'll combine all of the skills that you've got and you'll create a full stack app. You'll be using databases and you'll be creating them and manipulating them and pulling information from them. You'll be using Python. You'll be using a framework called Flask, which allows you to do back-end things. It's going to be incredibly useful because mainly this course is created for beginners. Anyone that wants to learn this stuff will be able to with this course. It's taught by industry professionals, people that have been teaching for a long time. So you are going to be in the right hands. A bunch of careers that you can get. You can be a front-end developer, a back-end developer, user experience, user interface designers, or UX, UI. You can be a data analyst with the Python skills that you gain. It should be a really good course, especially if you're wanting to hone your skills on the full stack application. During the course, please leave questions, leave feedback, and we really thank you for choosing us. Good luck with the course, and we will talk to you soon. All right, welcome to the first section of the course, HTML and CSS. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. HTML is the language that basically creates the structure of the page and the content, puts the images in, puts in the links and things like that. CSS comes in and lets you create layouts and lets you beautify your website. It lets you put in fonts and colors and things like that. So these two languages combined is how you build websites. And so this is the front end portion of the course where you're going to build the things that the users are going to see and that they're going to be able to interact with. Also, I want to call your attention to each one of these sections. The HTML, CSS, the SQL, and the Python sections of the course will have a further study section, which is basically things that don't have a lot to do with the core concepts, but they're still really nice to know. And so just be on a lookout for those. Those will be at the end of each section, and you'll be able to go out and learn more things if you want to, but if you skip those sections, it's really not going to hurt you that much in the whole overarching concepts of the course of building full stack apps. So just be on a lookout for that. We're going to be talking about how to build something like this. We will learn the CSS and HTML necessary to be able to build this layout here. We're going to create this site about sloths. I think sloths are kind of a pretty cool animal, and so we're going to build the site about them, and we'll learn the code that's going to be required to be able to build out this layout and have these rollovers and have the fonts and the colors and all of those different things. The way I'm going to run this course is we will learn a little bit and then we'll go use it in the project, and then we'll learn a little bit more and then go use that in the project as well. So just kind of a heads up there. Now, you should have had this zip file given to you where if we open it up, we have this folder in here. We want to extract this folder, and this is where we're going to work and do all of our things. So I'm going to extract that to my desktop here. You want to put this folder in a place where you can get to it, a place where you're going to be able to easily find it and easily be able to access it. So I'm going to extract that, and let's take a look at what's in here. So we have this layout picture, which is just that. It's just kind of a picture showing us, all right, this is what the layout's going to look like. It's just kind of our guide, right? And then we have a practice folder. There's nothing in there, but that's where we'll create files and such to be able to practice different concepts and then go apply them to the project. The images is just that. It's the images of the sloths, and that's going to be what we'll use to put in our site. I just didn't want you guys to have to go out there and find them. And then fonts, we have this jungle font, which we are applying right here. And so we'll talk about how to use CSS to apply fonts to our pages. And then we have our CSS folder, which there's nothing in there, but there will be when we actually start creating this. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing in this course. Thanks for coming, and I hope that you have a good time. And we will see in the next video where we're going to talk about the tools that we'll need to be able to build this. So we'll see you then. All right, welcome to this video. We're going to talk about the tools we're going to need. The first thing is our editor, Visual Studio Code. This is where we're going to be typing in our code, our HTML, our CSS, and this is where we're going to build pretty much everything. This is a pretty popular editor. I want to say it's one of the most popular, if not the most used in industry. So it's a really good idea to get pretty familiar with this. So we're going to go to code.visualstudio.com, or you can always just Google it. That works too. And just click here or click on download, whatever you want. And it should detect the operating system that you're on. This works on Mac, it works on Windows, it works on Linux, it works everywhere pretty much. So I'm going to hit download for Windows, and I am going to, well, I already downloaded it, but I'll download it again here. Should show up in your browser. So we're just going to click on that and get the install going. Sign your life away. And you can create a desktop icon if you want. But keep all this other stuff checked. We're really not going to mess with the defaults. And we'll hit install here. Now, while that's installing, the browser I'm going to be using is Chrome. So google.com/Chrome. Another really good one is Brave, if you want to use that. The browser that you use in this course isn't too important because the stuff that we're going to be doing should work everywhere. But the browser I'm going to use is Chrome just because it's the most popular one. So kind of a similar thing here. Google.com/Chrome. Download Chrome, get it installed. All right, so let's take a look at Visual Studio Code. It's done. We'll launch it. We'll hit finish. And let's just take a look at it because there is one thing we're going to want to install in here. So here we are. Eventually, we'll open this in a folder, that folder that I talked about in the previous video. We're going to open that in here, and this is where we're going to pretty much do the rest of the courses. We'll just be in here. But one thing we're going to need is come over here to where this extensions. If you don't see it, you can click on the dots. But what we want here is extensions, and your icons here may look a little bit different, and that's okay. But we want this little Tetris looking icon here. And I got a bunch of stuff installed. If this is your first time installing this, you're not really going to see anything here. But what we're going to want is live server. So let's do a search for that. And it's this one with this little purple icon here by Ritwick Day. Guess that's how you say it. And we want to get that installed. Once you have it installed here, well, I already have it installed, right? So I can do uninstall just to show. We're just going to hit install. It should be pretty quick. And then really when you install these extensions, a good thing to do is just restart Visual Studio Code. But you'll know it worked because down here, you'll have this go live button. And that's what we want. This is going to be how we're going to launch our project in a browser so we can take a look at it as we're building it. But that's really it. We want Visual Studio Code, we want our live server, and then we'll be on our way. And this is going to be what we'll eventually be building. Let's actually start typing some code out. So this is the folder that we got from the zip file, and we want to open this folder inside of Visual Studio Code. So one way you can do it is right click in this folder and do open with code. And that's what I'm going to do here. So there's my HTML, CSS basics folder. There's my CSS folder with nothing in it. There's my fonts folder with my font file in there, my images, the practice folder that we're going to use, and then our layout. Now you can see images in here. Can't really edit them, but you can take a look at them while you're in here. Now, if that doesn't work, the other way you can do it is file, open folder. You'll go to wherever that folder is, and then you'll double click it and then hit select folder. That's another way of doing it. Either way works, but the whole thing is we want to make sure our project folder is open here inside of Visual Studio Code. Okay, so first thing we want to do here is go into practice. I'm going to right click and do new file, or you can click on practice here and do the little new file button up here. The main thing is we want to make sure it's in our practice folder. And I'm going to just call it, I don't know, let's call it HTML intro. And we'll do capital I there just to get it going. This is just how we create a basic HTML page. Make this a little bit bigger. Now you can hit Control plus and Control minus will make your code bigger or smaller. I think this looks pretty good. Now this is our first HTML page. Now the first thing a page always needs is this thing called the doc type. All this does is tell the browser what version of HTML we're using. So in this case, we're using 5, which is the most up-to-date HTML version out there. It's been out for a really long time, but this is what this doc type does, is it just says, hey, browser, we're using HTML5, which gives us all the cool features that it can do. Next thing we want to do is create what are called tags. This is an HTML tag. A tag starts with a less than sign, has some sort of text in it, and then it ends with a greater than. Now notice there's 2 HTML tags. One is the opening. This is the opening tag, and this is the closing tag. And you know it closes because of this little slash. Now these two things together are called an element. When you have an opening and closing tag, that gives you what's called an element. And all this is saying is, hey, this is where my HTML document starts. This is where it ends. All right, let's head on to the next one. The next tag you'll have in pretty much every document that you ever create is called a head tag. And this is where you put a bunch of kind of behind the scenes stuff. First one is title. Let's go. This is my first HTML page. Woohoo. Okay, now the head, like I said, the stuff that goes inside the head tag are things that kind of happen behind the scenes. It's loading stuff like CSS files. It's having metadata in there. It's not really stuff that you're going to see on the actual page. Now let's run this. Now the first thing you want to do below is make sure you've saved it. Now notice with Visual Studio Code here, as I type, as I make changes, you get this little white dot. That means that, hey, you've made changes and you haven't saved it. You'll never see the changes that you make on the page until you've actually saved it. So when I hit Control S, or Command S on a Mac, you can see that that went away. You can do the file save, but you really want to get into the habit of doing, shortcut keys, the Control S, the Command S. Whenever you can use the keyboard, it makes it so everything goes a lot quicker. So let's take a look at what this title tag does inside of our head tag. So what I can do here is hit Go Live. And what this will do is it should open the browser, and this will be the default browser on your machine. And it set up a little server to put your website into. So notice how it says, okay, this is my server. It opens it in the practice folder over here, and it's opening this HTML intro.html file. So now what we can do is, as we're creating code and as we're saving it, we'll just keep this open and we'll be able to see the changes that we do. Now notice the title. What we put inside the title here shows up here. This is my first HTML page. Woohoo. Right? So anything we put inside the title here shows up in this tab. This is really important for search engine optimization. Google uses these titles to kind of figure out what your page is about. Okay, so let's move on. Another tag that you'll see a lot is meta. And I'll just kind of type this out and we'll talk about it. Meta tags are, if you've ever heard of a thing called like metadata, this is just data about your web page. You can put in the author, you can put in keywords. There's all kinds of different things you can put here, but for now, we'll just stick with the char set. The char set is the character set. UTF-8 is just all the different characters that could be used on your web page. UTF-8 is kind of the default one, but this is like English characters of different languages are all contained in this character set, and we're just telling the browser, hey, this is the character set we're going to be using. Okay, so that's kind of all we'll do in the head tag for now. The next one you'll always see is the body. This is the stuff that goes on the page. Okay, now with that being said, let's talk about a thing called comments. Okay, this is how you do a comment. Let me save it, and I can take a look at my page here, and nothing's on there still, because when I put in comments, these are just for your reference. This is how you can explain things to other developers. Hey, this is what I'm doing. You can explain your code with it. You can put reminders. You can put copyright information. Just this, you basically put whatever you want in here. Just know that whatever you put in here doesn't show up on the page. So if I come over here, okay, and I save that, Control S, and I open this up again, okay, now I got text on the page and the comment doesn't show up. Now you can right click and do View Page Source or Control U, and this will show you the code of the page. Okay, now this is just code that the browser injected, so we don't need to worry about that. But here's the comment that I put in, and there's the text that I put in as well. It's another way you can quickly see the source or the code of a page. Yeah, this is my first page. Now, Another thing you can use for comments is sometimes you have code that doesn't work. You can comment out code, and then if your page starts to work, you'll know that's the troubled code. There's just a bunch of stuff you can do with comments. But yeah, so that's how you get text on the page here. So let's actually start doing some more things with this. Let's talk about the bold tag. So let's say I want to bold some text on a page. I can do that with the B tag. And the B tag is a B element. There's an opening and closing B tag. And it does kind of what it sounds like. Anything that's in these B tags will be bold. We can italicize things with the I tag. And again, it works just like the bold tag. Whatever's inside of the I element or the B element are bold or italics. Notice also, HTML ignores white space. And what I mean by that is as I'm creating text on the page, it just puts it all on one line, which you may or may not want. If I want italics as well to be on the next line, I can use a line break tag, BR. Okay, and that brings it down to the next line. Now notice how I have the closing, I'm like opening and closing a tag in one. This is called a non-empty tag. There are certain tags where you can, there's not going to be anything in this. It's not changing text or anything like that. It just says, hey, put in a line break. And so I don't need to have like a opening BR tag and a closing BR tag. Like that just doesn't make sense because I'm not going to be putting anything inside of here. So what we can do is a non-empty tag where we put the slash at the end. And that just means we're basically opening and closing it all in one. Where here, if the slash is at the beginning, that means it's a closing tag. Here, if it's at the end of the text, it's an opening and closing tag, all in one. Okay, if you ever put like paragraphs of information, you'll want a P tag. What that is, right, if whenever you just have paragraphs of text, you want to put them inside of P tags. That's what the P tag does. And notice how I didn't have a line break here. I didn't have a BR tag, but yet it's still on its own line. That's a P tag just kind of has a built-in break. And these are called block level elements, which we'll talk about a little later. But just know that when you use P tags, right, if I come over here, then it's on its own line as well. That's just kind of how the P tags work. Okay, another thing you can do are called lists. Now we're not going to use lists in the course very much, but they're good to know. All right, we have a UL tag, which stands for unordered list, and we have an LI tag, which stands for list item. So items inside of the list. So let's take a look at what this does. It just makes like a bulleted list. So the UL says, hey, start an unordered list, end the unordered list, start a list item, end the list item. And I can put as many of these list items as I want in here, and they'll just be bulleted. I'm going to copy this as well. And we can do ordered list, which is an OL. Okay, and it kind of does what you would expect. Save that, come over here. Same thing, it tabs it over, kind of like what we saw here, but instead of a bullet, we have numbers. So however many list items I have in here, it's just going to automatically count for me. Notice how I didn't put in the 1, yet there's a 1 there because it's an ordered list. All right, so lists are great, and if you want to have steps, like for maybe a recipe, like this is how you bake something, put in an ordered list of the steps, and then an unordered list would be great for like the ingredients. That's a really good common use for them, but it's a good thing to know because, you know, things like this happen and you have to use them every once in a while. Okay. I think that's going to be about it. The last thing, well, a couple other things actually. Let's talk about tabbing. Whenever you have a tag inside of a tag, it's a good idea to tab it over. It just makes your code look a lot more readable. I have this opening tag here, and the closing tag should always be directly under the thing it's closing or next to it if it's just something quick, right? Like with the P tag that we have here. Now, if it's a short little sentence, it's usually okay to have the opening tag and the closing tag all on one line. But if we have a tag that has a bunch of stuff in it, it's a really good idea to create that tag, put the stuff in it and tab it over, and then put the closing tag directly under the thing that it's closing. And notice how Visual Studio Code tries to help us here by drawing these little lines here. Another thing you can do is click on one of the tags and it'll highlight its pair. So I can say, hey, this is the opening tag for UL. Oh, there's the closing UL tag. So that's another thing that Visual Studio Code does that helps and is pretty useful. Another thing is just folder management. It's a good idea to have different folders, especially when you get a bunch of files. Like we'll eventually have not a ton of files, but enough to where it's going to make sense to where we'll want folders to separate everything out. All right, let's start building our Sloth website. So I'm going to click in here, kind of make sure this blue box is around, and I'm going to hit new file. Or I could right click and do new file. Either one works here. But I'm going to call it index.html. Index is an important name. Here, let me close out of this. Because this is what the browser looks for when it goes to a server. When a browser goes to a website, it looks for the file called index.html, and it's just going to display that by default as the home page. All right, so let's create this. A cool little trick you can do in Visual Studio Code is I can type an exclamation here and hit tab, and then boom, it just creates for me the basic HTML page. It gives me my title, another meta tag we'll talk about, and it does my char set for me. So yeah, I like that. Let's do that. Let's use it. So we talked about this. This other meta tag helps pages look good and function well on mobile websites. We're not going to cover that in this course, but that's the point of the viewport meta tag. But there's a couple other ones I want to go over. Is description. And then we have content equals. Okay. So the description meta tag is what it kind of sounds like. It's just a description of the website itself. So I guess let's keep that capital for Sloth lovers. Now, a couple things real quick. What are these things, right, that are kind of in this like light blue color? These are called attributes. And a lot of HTML tags have these things called attributes. It's just a way to configure or give more information about a tag. So the HTML tag has a lang attribute, which means what language is this website in? Well, it's in English, EN. The meta tag has a bunch of different attributes. First one is char set, which we already talked about. Another one is name, where we can say, hey, we want to give a description. Because meta tag is kind of like data about data. It's the data about our web page. So I can say, hey, I want to give a description to my web page, and this is the content of that description. Another one I can do, we're going to do two more here, so I'm going to copy and paste that twice, is keywords and author. So these attributes allow us to kind of configure and give more information to these tags so they can do what they need to do. And you're always going to have the attribute equals some sort of value, right? So keywords are like when we go to Google and we type in keywords, what are the keywords that we would want to have our site pull up with? So Sloths, Sanctum, I don't know, maybe we want people when they type in visit Sloths for our stuff to come up. Whatever we want here, that's all I'll put here for the keywords. But this is just when you're building a site, you really want to think about, okay, what are the keywords that I would want my site to come up to when they type in these specific keywords. Okay, author, I don't know, we'll have an alias here, Sam the Sloth. Now, will these meta tags make your site show up number one on Google? No. But do they hurt? No, they don't. This is okay. This is something that, to me, it's like the more you can do to help Google like your page, and do it. When a crawler, when Google comes to your site and starts looking through your code, it's going to see these tags, and this is just giving Google more information about your page, which I don't think hurts. All right, so let's save this. Let's run this on our live server. I'm going to dispose of the server that we had before, and we'll run this. Oh, we didn't change the title. Let's do that. Let's say Sloth Sanctum, save that. Okay, there we go. So not much, right? But I do want to change this favicon. Let's talk about how to get that in there. So I'm going to go right here and use what's called a link tag. I'm going to link a favicon to my page. We do rel, which is the attribute that just says, hey, what type of linking are we doing here? And we're going to be doing a shortcut icon. And then we do another attribute called href. And that's basically saying, hey, this is where we're referencing the image here. And if I go into my images, I have my favicon right here. It's just this goofy looking little sloth guy. That's what I want to use for my favicon. So I say, okay, my index page is right here in my HTML CSS basics folder. Where is the favicon in relation to this file? Well, if we take a look at it, right, index is inside of here. This is called our root folder or our project folder. I have to go into the images folder and I want to load favicon.png. So that's what I type here. I say go into the images folder / and notice how Visual Studio Code's helping us out a little bit here. It's like, oh, I went into images. These are the things I see. Cool. Which one do you want? Well, I want the favicon. And then I'm going to save that. Okay. And then there we go. It's there. For these favicons, you can use most PNGs, JPEGs, most images will work. You just put them in here as a shortcut icon and it should show up there. Okay. Well, we have our site started. We'll keep going on this. Another really important concept we need to learn is links. How do you create links in a page? So I'm going to go to my practice again, new file. We're going to call this, just call it links.html. Do the same thing, exclamation, tab. We'll call this links. So the way you do links, you would think, right? It might be like a link tag or something like that. Nah, the guys who created HTML said, nah, it's going to be an A tag. And that's short for anchor. So an A tag followed by href, which we've seen before with the link tag. And this is whatever site or page we want to link. Okay, and then this is text the link says, or I guess let's call it, let's like link text or something. I don't know. So let's kind of save this and run it and see what it does. Okay, I click on that and well, this doesn't exist. So it's yelling at me, hey, this doesn't exist, can't go there. Yeah, that's fine. That's totally what we would expect. But this is how you do the links. Let's get rid of those. So what I can do here is I could say, okay, I want to link this to Google. Right, save that. Let's make this a little smaller for us. So when I click on it, it takes me to google.com. So you can link to external web pages. But another thing we could do is I could say, all right, I want to link this to HTML intro. So you can link to external pages, but you can also link to other pages in your website as well. And that's going to be mainly what we'll do is we'll have a home page that links to a contact page and such. But the reason why this worked is because these are all in the practice folder, right? We have our practice folder here and HTML intro.html is inside of the same spot links is. If I wanted to link to index, right, I would have to do the .. to take me up a level and then index.html. So it's always really important that you kind of realize where your HTML pages are that you're working in relation to the stuff you want to link to. So if I was on index and I wanted to link to links, then I would say practice/links, right? So it's just important that as you're working in these HTML pages that you're always cognizant and paying attention to, okay, links is inside of practice. I want to link to index. Okay, cool. That means I have to go outside of practice, which is .. and then I can load index. So I click on that and it takes me to that blank page. Another thing that's important with links is, let's go back here to Google, is when you link to these external websites, these other websites that are completely different, right? Don't have a whole lot to do with your page. Like if I click on Google, okay, I just lost my page and it was replaced with Google. So what I can do is this attribute called target, where I do target equals _ blank. And what that does is it makes it so when I click on Google, it opens it up in a new tab, and then I still have my website open in another one. That's a good kind of rule of thumb. It's a good practice to do. Like whenever you have a link that goes somewhere completely different, a completely different web page, use target equals _ blank so it opens in a new tab. All right, that's it for links, and we're going to take a look at images, and then we'll go from there.
Enjoying your journey into web development? If you're excited to expand your skills and tackle more complex projects, check out our full course in the description. It offers over 480 lectures and numerous projects in HTML, CSS, SQL, and Python to help you master full stack development. Now, let's continue coding.
So we're going to head into the practice folder, and I'm going to call this one images.html. And we're going to do our little exclamation, hit tab. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time editing this, but we need to talk about how we put in images into an HTML page. Pretty important stuff. First thing we want to talk about is, well, what tag does that? It's the img tag, image tag. And then we have an attribute called src, and this tells us, okay, where is the image? Okay, and then we have another attribute called alt, and this is a text description of the image. Now this is another one of these tags where you can just kind of open and close it all in one, because there's really nothing in between an image tag. Now the source basically says, hey, where is the image? Well, again, we need to know where we're at inside of the project here. We're inside of a practice folder, and let's say I want to bring in the logo. Well, this is kind of interesting, right? We're inside of practice, so I need to go outside of practice, then I need to go inside of images, and I need to load logo. So the way you do that is you say ... that takes you up a level, so that takes me outside of practice. I'm going to go inside of images, and I'm going to load logo. And then my alt attribute's just going to be, I don't know, just logo for now. Okay, we'll save that, close it, open it back up. Okay, and then there we go. Now, if I were to accidentally misspell this and we had a broken link, that's why this alt attribute's important as well, as it shows up. So this alt attribute is important because when Google shows up and starts scanning our page, well, sometimes, Google isn't going to know this is a logo of a sloth face, because these crawlers can't really look at images like we can and know what it is. So this alt attribute lets the crawlers of our website know exactly what this image is. So I maybe would say something like sloth logo. Okay, also, it helps with screen readers. There's blind people that use the web pages, and as they're using pages, it's reading out to them what's on there. And so it would go to the image and it would read out what's in our alt attribute, just so a blind person using our page would know that, hey, there's an image of a sloth logo because we have this alt attribute here. So really important, you always want to have an alt attribute on every image that you do. A couple other things you can do is define like width and height. So if I wanted this to have a width of 100 pixels, there we go. If you only define a width, it keeps it still in scale. And what I mean by that is I could say a height of like 20, and now I can just do all kinds of weird stuff with my images, which I don't really want to do right now. So I usually only define one, and it keeps everything kind of in scale, and it keeps my image still looking good and not stretched or squished or anything like that. Another thing we kind of need to pay attention to is file size and actual size. So currently this has a width of 100 pixels on my page, right? Now, if I take a look at this and I mouse over, this is 44 kilobytes big. Now, if I come here and I shrink it down to like 50, okay, on the page it's smaller, but it's still 44 kilobytes large. So it doesn't matter how big your images are on your page, they're always going to be the same file size. So that's something that you need to pay attention to, is the file size of your images. You don't want them to be large. So how would you get them smaller? Well, you can take them into programs like GIMP and Photoshop and shrink them down, actually physically shrink their file sizes, or you can use a website like this. It's called TinyPNG. You can just Google like image compressor. There's a lot of websites out there that do this, but you can basically just kind of throw your image in here and it will do everything it can to make it a smaller file size. And it is really important that you optimize your images, because a really telltale sign of a beginning web developer is you'll go to their page and you'll have this small little image slowly loading, and it's because they shrunk it down, right? They were able to say, okay, I want it to be smaller through code, but what they didn't do though is they didn't actually go and make it smaller. Like when I mouse over this, it says it's actually 250 pixels by 239, and that makes it 44 kilobytes big. So I can shrink it down as much as I want with code, but it's still going to be the same file size. So that's something to pay attention to with images as well. All right, that's about it for that. So let's go actually put some images and things in the Sloth site. All right, now that we've learned a little bit about links and images, let's actually start back with our project here, and let's create the header of the site. Now to do that, we're actually going to use a tag that makes sense. It's called header. This is called a semantic tag. These tags don't really have a lot of functionality. It's more descriptive. Like the header tag isn't really going to do much. All it's really saying is, hey, this is where the header starts and this is where the header ends. It's a lot like the body tag. The body tag doesn't do a whole lot. It just says, hey, this is where the content of the page starts and this is where it ends. So when the web crawlers come to our page and they start looking at things, if we have these semantic tags, it's going to be easier for them to crawl the page and know all the different sections. So that's really all this semantic tag is doing, is just saying, hey, this is where the header starts. This is where it ends. Now in here, if you remember, in the upper left-hand corner, we had the logo and then we had Sloth Sanctum, and that's going to be kind of what we're building out. And it's common practice with web design to have the logo take you home. So that's the first thing we want to do, is set up a link here. And this link is going to take us to index.html. Now I want multiple things to be in this tag. I want an image to be in here and text. So I'm going to open it here and close it here so I can have the two things inside. And like I said, always tab over when you're inside of something. So I'm going to bring in the image, and we know we want to put in logo.png. Our alt attribute's going to be Sloth Sanctum logo. And then we'll just kind of open and close it all in one. And then I have my text as well. And that's another thing with some of these tags, is sometimes you don't have to close them. A break is totally okay if you don't have the slash there. So we're not going to do that. Now there are some environments where you have to make sure you always close them, but here, just with HTML and CSS, we don't have to do that. Now, if alarms are going off right now and you're saying, Dave, you did it wrong, you would be correct. So let's take a look at what we have here. So Sloth Sanctum logo showing up, but we have the image, it's dead. Why? Well, because I didn't tell it to go into images. Remember, we're an index, which is in our root folder. So I have to say the source is going to be go into images and load logo. And I didn't do that. That's a very common mistake. So just always be aware where you're at. Now this is looking pretty bad. HTML by itself is pretty ugly, to be honest. So as we go through this, it's going to look it's going to look meh. It's not going to look that great. But once we actually get to the CSS portion and we start styling and adding fonts and pictures and different colors, it'll look a lot better, and we'll start to have more of a layout. Don't be freaked out, is all I'm saying, is it will start to look better once we get into the CSS portion. All right, in my header, I'm going to have another semantic tag called nav. And nav is just that. It's defining where the navigation bar for the page is. So we're going to have a bunch of A tags here. This is going to take us to index.html, say home. We'll have this all be caps. Now a cool hotkey here in Visual Studio Code is on Windows anyways. It's Alt-Shift and then you press the down arrow, and that copies and pastes in one fell swoop whatever line you're on. And I'm going to have 3 links here. On Mac, it's going to be something similar, Alt-Shift down arrow or maybe Command-Shift. Just you can play around with it till you get it. But I'm going to call this contact. And this is going to take us to Slothville. Now, contact doesn't exist yet. We'll be creating that here later, but I'm just going to set that up for now. And then I know Slothville goes to that external website. So we'll put it in there. And remember, we don't want, well, let's save it. And I'll show you what we don't want. We don't want this. When I click on that, it replaces my page. I don't want that, because it's a completely different website. So remember, we talked about that. So we want target equals underscore blank. So now when I click on it, it opens in its own tab, and that's exactly what we want here. Okay. Now, another thing I want to mention here with images can be copyrighted. In other words, you can't use them unless the owner says you can. So enter this amazing website called Unsplash. Unsplash is a really cool webpage where you can get a bunch of images that are basically copyright free. So for us, we could do a search for sloth, and maybe some of these look familiar, and they should, because these are images that we're going to use for the page. But also they're things where they're copyright free. In other words, we don't have to worry about getting sued if we use them, which is always a good thing. Okay. So you just click on it, download free, just get it downloaded, put it in your images folder, and you're on your way. But this is a great resource to get really nice free images. So FYI. Okay. So we got the header basically created. We have our nav bar, we have the logo and the title, right, of the page. Not this title, but like the title text. And we're going to stop here. All right, in this video, we need to talk about two tags that are really important, div and span. And we also need to talk about a block level element and an inline element and what those are and what the differences are. So let's head to practice, new file. I'll just call it divspan.html because that's basically what we're going to be talking about here. We'll call it divspan, or like div versus span, I guess. So I'll use a comment here. So divs are block level elements, and we'll say spans are inline. And this is what I mean by this. So I'm going to create a div. Divs are like building blocks of a web page. You put things in divs. They like basically section things off. If you ever see like a section of a page, chances are it's in a div. So I'll put this. Okay, so we got div and span, and then we have div again. All right, let's save that and run it, and then let's go over it. So div tags are, I call them like kind of like bully tags. They don't want anything next to them. Notice how I don't have a break in here. I don't have a p tag in here, yet span is on its own line. And it's on its own line because div tags don't like to have things next to them. They're block level. They take up a block of space. Also, you're able to give these, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but just because we kind of need to do this, this is how you can apply CSS inline. I'm going to give this a height of 200 and a width of 100. And it's okay if you don't completely understand this right now. But notice how there is 200 pixels tall, so that's why everything kind of got shoved down. Now, if I do the same thing to this span tag, say style equals, we'll just do a height. We'll say height of 400. Notice how it didn't push anything down. This span tag is an inline element. It's like, I call them like ninja tags. They get in there and they blend. They don't disrupt the flow of the document. They don't push anything around. Here I'm telling it to have a height of 400 and then it just ignores it because inline elements don't do that. They don't have height and widths. They're not meant to push things around and take up space. They're just in there to just, usually what you use span tags for is this. You put text in them and then you apply CSS to it. Where divs, they have height and widths and things like that. If I come over here and I put another span tag, notice how it's still on the same line because divs almost have a line break built into them, just like p tags. Because they're block level elements, they disrupt the flow. They get in there, they're big, they're noisy, they push things around. Where even though I'm telling this span to have a 400 height, it doesn't do it. It just wants to get in there, do its thing, and not disrupt anything, not push anything around, not mess up the layout. Where divs, no, they take up space, and they're made to kind of pretty much create sections of a page, where span tags, like I said, are just meant to kind of get in there, let you apply CSS to something, and that's it. So again, block level elements, they disrupt the layout, they move things around, they don't let things be on the same line as them. Spans are inline, they allow things to be on the same line. They're like ninja tags, they get in and out. And then divs can have a height and width because they're block level. These span tags do not. All right, now that we learned about divs and spans and block level and inline, let's start using those a little bit on our web page here. we're done with the header. So I'll hit enter a couple times here. Now there's another semantic tag called section. And that's exactly what it sounds like. When you have different sections on your web page, you put them in these tags. Now, I'm not going to do much with this one right now. Eventually, what I'm going to do is use CSS to put an image in there. And that's going to be the image that you saw with the big banner image of the sloth eating the leaf. So that's where we're going to put that. But for now, we're just going to leave it. But we're going to create another section, though. And this is going to be where we saw those 3 sloths at the bottom going across. So the first thing we have here is a header tag. These are just, here, let's type this out. Header tags are just that. Let's get rid of this. Okay, come meet our friendly sloths. What they do is these are block level elements as well. So they don't let anything go on the same line, and you can give them height and widths, but they also bold the text. And when Google is coming through your page and reading things, it looks at this and goes, oh, this is a header, so I better treat it as such. That means there's probably a new section here or whatever. The headers are important because this is where you put like keywords and things that are important. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have another div here. Think of this div as a box. So inside this div, I'm going to have 3 boxes. I'm going to have those 3 pictures of those sloths, right? So each one of these divs is going to be a sloth. So we can put that here. And also what I'm going to be doing is using CSS to put the image in, because CSS can actually put in background images. And so we'll be doing that a little bit later. But for now, I'll just put in some text that just kind of lets us know what's going on. So, okay, we have one section here. Let's do this. This will have the banner image in it. Then we have another section, which has the header, come meet our friendly sloths. And then we have think of it as like a container or a box on the page. And inside of that box, we're going to have 3 more boxes that are a picture of each one of those sloths. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to create the footer. The footer is another semantic tag. This is the stuff that goes at the bottom. Links, contact information, copyright information, whatever you want to have there. So here I'm just going to put a smaller version of my logo. Okay. And you've seen some footers that have 50 links in it. This is a simple site. We're only going to have the image, and then we're going to have some copyright information. So next to the image, we're going to throw in a span tag. Remember, we talked about that. And this is this is some bonus stuff. Wouldn't it be nice, like we have copyright 2024, 2025, 2022, whenever the site is built. Well, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to go in there and update that every year? Well, there's some cool JavaScript here that we can use that'll give us the year automatically and just print it out for us. So we're going to use that here in a minute. But the first thing I want to do is I'm going to use the copyright symbol. There's a bunch of kind of cool stuff that you can do with HTML. If you do the ampersand, and I'm going to say copy, I think trade is one for trademark symbol. There's a bunch of different symbols you can use when you use the ampersand, but I'm going to say copy, then semicolon. And what that gives us is, just that, the copyright symbol. So I'm going to say copyright, and then I'm going to use the script tag. This is kind of, like I said, bonus content here. This is how you can insert JavaScript into a page, is using the script tag. And I'm going to say document.write, new date, get full year. I'm not going to go into too much here because this isn't a JavaScript class, but document.write just does that. It writes to the page. And what we're doing is we're creating this new date object, which is just this cool thing that has a bunch of functionality built in. And there's this method or this function called get full year, which just does that. It gets you the current year. So new date.get full year, that prints out 2024. And then when it becomes 2025, this will print out 2025. So this is a cool way to where we don't have to always go to all of our pages and update the copyright year. All right, and we want it to say copyright 2020, let's see, 2024 Sloth Sanctum. Okay, cool. Well, that's it for the HTML. we have all of our content. It looks really bad, like we mentioned, but we will remedy this. We will apply some CSS to this later, and we'll make it all laid out, and we'll have colors and fonts and all kinds of cool stuff. All right, in this video, we're going to get the contact page ready. Now, if we take a look at this, the contact page is also going to have the navigation bar and the logo and stuff. It's not going to have this section, but it will also have the footer as well. So we're going to want to make sure we put those things in the contact page. So that's what I'm going to do here, is I'm just going to create a new file, call it contact.html. And the other reason I want to do that, right, is because right here, I'm linking to a file called contact.html. So I want to make sure I name that the same. And really, I'm just going to hit Control A, that copies everything. Control C, that copies what I have selected, and I'm going to paste it in here. And then I'm going to come over here, change out my title, Contact Sloth Sanctum. And then, yeah, we could probably change this a little bit up, like Contact the Sloth Sanctum. Don't really need that anymore. We'll say Contact here, Sam the Sloth. Oh yeah. The rest of this is pretty much the same. The header is going to be the same, so we don't need to change that. We do need to get rid of this. We're not going to have this section either, but we are going to have the footer. So our work will begin here. Okay, and just to kind of test it, I can reclose that or reopen it, or I could just come up here and say, okay, show me contact.html. And there we go. We have the logo, we have the text, we have the nav bar, we have the footer. Yeah, so this looks good. So eventually what we're going to put here is a contact form and a table. Let's create a new page here in practice. Call it forms. And then like usual, put in the HTML, and then we will create a form here. There's a lot in forms. There's a lot of stuff to learn, and just form creation is so important. Like if you are trying to sell something and your form is hard to use, people are just going to abandon it. There's a reason why, like with Amazon, you can buy something literally in like 2 clicks. The easier you can give their money to them, the more they're going to make. And so it's with the form design is just so important. You need to make sure that your forms are easily used and don't make it to where your users don't want to use them anymore. But to create a form, there's a lot more to it than this, but just for what we're going to do here, just a form tag should be good enough. Okay, now in the form, we create things called inputs, and we have a type attribute, which that kind of went away quick. There are a ton of types. There's a bunch. Okay, we're only going to use a few in this project, but the first one we're going to use is text. And then up here, we can say, hey, give us your name, and then put in a break tag. Okay, let's bring this open. So practice, and then what was this? Forms. So yeah, text box, simple text box, puts it in there. You're able to type things in. Now I'll go over some other ones that we're not going to use in the project just because it's good to know about them, but there's just a lot. There's a lot of these. Now, before we move on though, there's another thing that's kind of cool that we need to know about is these things called labels. And that's again what it is. It's just saying, hey, this is a label for the text box that we just created. So I'm going to say this is a label for the text box where I type in a name. Okay, and then I'm going to cut that and put it here. I've just said, hey, name, the text name is a label. Now notice how it didn't really do much, but I did say this is a label for the text box we're putting in a name. Now the way to connect a label to the text box itself is with this for attribute, and then we throw in an ID. The ID and the for attribute values need to match up. So I'm going to say name as well. And what this does is it makes them match up. So now if I click on name, it selects the text box that it matches up with. So if I deselect that, if I click in there, sure, that's fine. If I click on name though, because it's its label, it'll also select the input, which is pretty cool. So it's good practice to always have a label for each one of your inputs. Well, let's do this. I'm going to create my button, and I'm going to say type as submit. And I'll just say submit here. Okay, there's my submit button. Now notice buttons are inline, right? That's why it's not on its own line here. So if I want that to go down, I can throw in a couple breaks. So now it's down there below. Now submit does what I tell it to. I can't go too far into this, but there's an action attribute for these forms where, like, basically when I click submit, it's going to run whatever file is here, but that's way beyond this course. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to make it like a dead link. So if you know something is going to have a link, but you don't know what, you can throw in the pound sign here, or the number sign, and hashtag, whatever you want to call it. And this basically just says, hey, it's a dead link. It's not going to do anything, but eventually we'll put something here. And this, what it tells it to do is now when I click submit, see how up there it tried to run it. So if I had like some sort of script file here, this would be like if I hit submit and then it goes off and pushes it to a database, or grabs the information from the form and then emails it out or something like that. You would have some sort of file or script here that would handle that. But again, way outside this course, but that's what the action attribute does. Okay, I'm just going to start throwing a bunch out here. We have input type equals email. And I'm not going to create labels for these either. Well, yeah, let's do it. Let's do a label for this one anyways. So we'll say this is a label for email. We're asking for the email. Then, of course, we need the ID of email to hook up the label with the input. This is going to look just like, to enter here so we can read it a little bit better. It's going to look just like the text box, right? Not a whole lot of difference here, but there is a big difference. I can come over here and say required. And what this does, and this is another interesting thing, is you can have attributes here that aren't equal to anything, because it used to be required equals required, or required equals true, or something like that. Well, that's redundant. So the HTML people just made it so you can just put in an attribute and that's it, and it works. And what that does is it makes it required, right? I try to submit the form and it says, hey, please fill out this field. So if I fill it out and I hit submit, it goes, that's not an email. It actually has some, if you've heard of regular expressions, but it actually checks it against a pattern and says, hey, this doesn't have an at symbol, so this isn't an email. So I go, okay, I throw in the at, make sure you have something following the at, right? So something, okay, and then it's happy and then it tries to submit. So with these required, it's kind of cool, but now the problem is this is done browser by browser. Chrome does this a certain way, Brave does this a certain way, Edge does this a certain way, Firefox, they all do it in their own way, so it can get sporadic. So it's a good thing to have, but it's not something that you would absolutely be like, okay, now I'm totally protected because I have required here, okay? Let's see, let's just do another quick input. So there's date, I think is another one. So has a kind of built-in calendar, all built into the browser, which is pretty cool. I'm just going to start throwing in a bunch just so this video isn't 50 hours long. We have type equals color. So if we want the user to select a color for something, that'll work. This is another good one that's used a lot if you want to drop down. We'll do Alt-Shift-Arrow. This gives us the drop downs. If we want a checkbox, notice how the input tag is used a bunch for this. A lot of different inputs. But now we got our checkboxes. And this is where labels would be pretty important. Let's do a label real quick for these. Because sometimes those checkboxes are a little small, right? They're kind of hard to click on, easy to miss. So I'm going to say this is a label for checkbox 1 and checkbox 2, and we'll do the same thing here. Now I just want to show you this, that you shouldn't, but you could mess with people with this. So I click on check 1, oh, but it checks as checkbox 2 because, right, this is a label for checkbox 1, so it checks that one, which is totally wrong. We don't want that. I click on check 2 and it checks the first one. Yeah, that's messed up. We don't want that, right? So make sure your labels, of course, match up with your actual inputs. Okay, but this is where labels are really cool because I can click on that and it checks the box instead of me having to go to this teeny little area and check it, right? All right, the other ones that are used a lot are radio buttons. Now checkboxes, of course, they're good if you have multiple options you want to check. They're good for like, hey, accept and sign your life away. Check this box. I agree with the terms and conditions. That's good use of those. And then you have your radio buttons where they're really good. Let's put another break here so they're kind of on their own. Radios are good when you want to give them a bunch of options, but you only want them to select one. Let's do the labels for these as well. We'll call this radio button 1. Just copy and paste here. Okay, radio button 2, radio button 3. And then we need the same thing here. ID, radio button 1. Copy that. Paste. Paste. Okay. Oh. Messed that up. There we go. All right. Now, these aren't working the way you would expect, right? Radio buttons, you should have a group, and then you should only be able to select one of those in the group. And the way you do this with radio buttons is with names. So I'm going to give them all the same name. I'll call it, I don't know, group 1. And now when I give all of these radio buttons the same name attribute, then the stars align and I can only select one out of the group. Okay, radio buttons are cool. They're used a lot. Okay, one last thing we'll go, and then we'll kind of end this video, is text areas, because those are used a lot as well. Text areas are these ones that you got to have the opening and closing tag here to get those to work. But that's just the text area where you want to give them, all the different information. If you want to let them just I don't know, this is good for feedback for restaurants or businesses or things. Just when you want to give them more space to type out a bunch of things, text area is the way to do that.
Congratulations on completing this introductory tutorial. You have taken a significant step towards becoming a full-stack developer. If you're ready to advance further, explore our full course linked below. It provides in-depth lessons on front-end and back-end technologies like CSS, SQL, and Python, real-world projects, and expert guidance to help you build robust web applications. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the full course.